bad. The Endangered Species Act provides a program for the conservation of threatened and endangered plants and the animals in the habitats that in which they are found in. Without the Endangered Species Act, we would lose some of our favorite animals. This can be even more important when our country is at war. There are multiple changes to the act before 9/11, but no changes after 9/11. However, some endangered species were threatened by the Gulf War after 9/11. The greenhouse effect is the process by which radiation from a planet's atmosphere warms the planet's surface to a temperature above what it would be without the atmosphere. This is a picture of greenhouse gases and how they get trapped in between the atmosphere, and the representation is the yellow line. The lack of airplanes in the sky after 9/11 attacks reduced the amount of greenhouse gas and allowed the scientists to test the greenhouse theories. The Gulf War caused a huge amount of greenhouse pollution. Globalization is the process by which businesses or other organizations develop international influences or start operating on an international scale. Globalization has many economic benefits, but it may have also helped spread the coronavirus. Some people believe that 9/11 terrorists attacked America partly because they believed we were too involved in the rest of the world. Before 9/11, Americans looked to globalization as a way to influence the rest of the world. After 9/11, Americans began questioning whether globalization was worth the bad effects. Okay. What were you doing the morning of 9/11?
Like most Americans, I was at work the morning of 9/11. I worked for a mortgage company, and I vividly remember being in a conference room and having a meeting when someone came in and let us know that the buildings had just been attacked. And we rushed over, turned on the TV, and it was a very surreal morning that morning. We had to keep working. People were still wanting to close on their homes, so we had customers coming in, and the whole time you were constantly going back and forth, watching the news, looking at the television to see what was happening next. So we'll never remember or never forget the morning of 9/11.
How did 9/11 affect people you know?
Well, first of all, we had some friends in New York that lost family members, and that was tragic. So it was a very sad uh, time and very upsetting time. But also, it was a time that really brought our country together. So it affected people I know by unifying us. We all realized that the country was at risk, and we needed to do what we needed to do to protect each other, to care for each other. So there was also a time after the attacks where America really felt like we were one family. We really wanted to take care of each other. Unfortunately, that time fades, and we go back to where we're fighting with each other and arguing with each other. But it always makes me think that somewhere underneath everything, Americans still are one family, and we really did come together. So I think that was probably the biggest thing that I remember about how it affected people.
How did 9/11 affect you?
Well, 9/11 affected me a couple of different ways. One, the simple answer, it definitely affected the business that I was in and the company I worked for. We were a home builder, and there was a period of uncertainty after that as America went on to a war footing and our economy was affected and our business was affected by that. So it definitely affected me in the very superficial sense that we were affected by that. But probably more importantly, it affected me internally. It made me stop and give pause to think about what we need to be appreciative of our family, of our health, of what we do have, and how quickly that could be taken away, like those poor folks in New York. So I think that's probably the bigger effect that it has had on me and has affected me ever since then.
What was never the same after 9/11?
Well, several things were changed by 9/11 that never went back to the way they were before. Um, Probably the easiest thing to think about that changed was the way we travel. Before 9/11, you could show up at the airport 5 minutes before your flight. You barely showed your driver's license, got your seat, and got on an airplane. Today, you go through multiple security checks and x-rays and sonograms and all kinds of different machines just to get on an airplane. So that was probably the most visible change. But, you know, Americans had to make a decision too, and we gave up a lot of our privacy to make sure that we were protected. So there were some changes in how we live and what information we're willing to share with the federal government, what we're willing to share with other entities so that they know that we're not a terrorist, that we're not a terrorist embedded in our country. And that's really a change that was fundamental to how America acts on a daily basis. So I think those are the two things that I really would note that have never gone back to normal. One, we can't travel the way we used to as freely as we did. And two, there's always a sense of, you know, you have to sacrifice some sort of your privacy in order to be protected.
Thank you for taking the time to answer my questions and for helping me understand what happened during 9/11.